Right, okay,
There you go.
there we go. Whew. Right, so welcome to Regulate and Restore Behaviour, the 6 steps to success. So I'm going to share the following with you. So, hello everyone, welcome to this masterclass, Regulate and Restore Behaviour, the 6 steps to success in the primary classroom, but can be used obviously in the secondary classroom as well. I'm Mandy Wilton. I'm founder of MW Education and I'm an associate coach with my good friend Kath at EduLead. So today is all about practical tools that you can use immediately, drawn from my experience and research. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about in this webinar is about what the key ingredients are to create a positive and therapeutic approach to managing behaviour. Then I'm going to go through with you my 6 steps to success in the classroom. And then finally, at the end of this masterclass, I'm going to talk to you about an offer that hopefully you can't refuse. So if you want to create the perfect classroom, then make sure you stay on to the end. If you really want to have that classroom that you really dream of and that you deserve, then make sure you stay on because I am going to give you the tools to be the creator of your own classroom nirvana. So, a bit about me. Who is this woman who says she's going to solve all my problems? So, my name's Mandy Wilton. I've got 30 years of experience in education. I've taught in mainstream, special, alternative provision, secondary, and primary. And I have extensive leadership experience. I've been a Senko, an assistant head, a deputy head, a head teacher, and most recently, an executive head teacher for an alternative provision, which included a primary and a secondary pupil referral unit, as well as behaviour outreach services. I also had uh, I don't know how to put this, but I was very proud to also manage the hospital teaching services at the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading. I was also in charge of home tuition services, and I've run many early intervention programmes, reducing the risk of exclusion and permanent exclusion. So I have a huge amount of experience. And then at one point, I also worked in a secondary SEMH boys' school that had significant challenges. I was the executive head of that school. And now I've set up my own education consultancy and I provide a range of services, including training in the area of behaviour. I am really passionate about making sure that we understand the root cause of a child's behaviour, as well as understanding our own emotional responses as adults. Now, we need to be really self-aware enough to understand that how we behave also impacts how our children behave. Now, you might know this adage of we bring the weather into our classrooms, but it is absolutely the thing, that's what we do. So, with all my years' experience, with all the training I've done and all the research, I set about working out, well, what are actually the key ingredients that I believe you need to create to create the right environment for an empathetic and therapeutic approach to understanding and teaching behaviour. And you'll hear me talk a lot about teaching behaviour because it isn't our job to control behaviour, it's our job to teach behaviour. And it's the most important thing that we can teach because once we teach behaviour, then we can teach everything else. So the first thing that we need to create this culture is equity. Now, we're all different, and I'm going to give you what you need in order to thrive. So something that I use a lot, an example when I'm doing my training is if you had a class of children, you're not going to give everybody a pair of glasses because not everybody needs a pair of glasses. That's equality. Giving everybody a pair of glasses is equality. What we have to do is give people glasses who need them, and that is equity, and that's the difference. And when I work with parents, I try to explain that when they say, "Well, it's not fair. Johnny goes out to do gardening club while my son sits in maths." And it's actually, well, Johnny needs to go to gardening club because he wants to be a gardener and Johnny wants to be an accountant. So that's why he's doing maths. So it's about equity and what do we all need that's individual to us. The second most important thing about creating really good culture in the school and classroom is about clarity. I'm going to be clear and I'm going to be consistent with what my expectations are. Now, sometimes I'm going to get things wrong, and that's okay because I'm going to tell you when that happens. Okay, so clarity. The third one is about curiosity, always being deeply curious. Why is a child behaving in this way? What has happened to this child in order that they're showing me such complex behavior? What is their behavior communicating to me? Do we have enough information? Have we engaged enough with the child and with the family? So being deeply curious. I was in a school yesterday with a teacher, a senior leader, talking about behaviour, and he said one of the teachers wasn't responding in a way he would expect that teacher to respond. The teacher was quite shouty, quite dominant, quite controlling. And I said, well, perhaps we need to get a bit more curious about why he's like that. Why is the teacher like that? So curiosity is about the child, but can also about be ourselves and colleagues about, well, why do we do things in that way? So being curious. The fourth one is about empathy. So how would you feel if you were in that same situation? So really connecting with empathy. So my daughter's doing her GCSEs, um, and she'd done 23 exams. And I thought, how would I feel? Because certainly when I did exams 30 years ago, I didn't do 23. I think I did 10. I asked ChatGPT, I did cheat. But I tried to connect with that empathy. I tried to connect with, well, how does she feel doing that? How do these kids feel? How would I feel if somebody said to me, right, you've got 5 weeks to sit 23 exams? So connecting with your empathy for the child. What is it like to walk in their shoes? What trauma might they have experienced? So really connecting with how it feels for them, what's their experience. And the other one is the next one is relationships. And now these are so important. And I'd like you to really think about, how do staff in your schools develop relationships? How do you create relationships with those kids? Now, I'm not saying that relationships is the be all and end all. Some people say, well, behavior is all about relationships. It's a key ingredient to creating the culture for behavior, but it's not, you can't solve everything just with relationships, but they are a key thing. So, how do you create relationships with the children that you're teaching? Um, and it's really key to think here about compassion, not control. Um, and having and saying to kids, having really clear expectations, so that clarity of, I will be there for you, but I expect this in return, but you can expect such and such from me. So being really, really clear that it's a two-way relationship, focusing on the problem solving, not control and compliance. And one of the things we're facing in schools is this real need to control behavior. And like anything, the tighter you try to control, the harder it becomes. And children cannot be controlled. All right. And you can't gain that compliance through control. But what you can do through relationships is teach behavior and try and solve the problem through it. So relationships are very important with children, but also remember that relationships extend to parents as well. So developing those strong relationships with parents and then with colleagues and other adults in the school. Um, the next one is around connection. So connection is really, really important. So I'm a big fan of a psychologist called Brené Brown, and she has written a book called Atlas of the Heart, and she describes connection as connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. Okay, so connection is about being seen, heard, and valued. And my question is, how many of our children are not connected to themselves or to others? And how many teachers and adults are not connected with themselves and then the children that they teach? Connection is so important, how we connect with ourselves and how we connect with others. Now, there is neuroscience research that tells us that feelings of disconnection actually share the same neural pathways with the feelings of physical pain. So I'm just going to repeat that because I think this is really important. The feelings of disconnection actually share the same neural pathways as the feelings of physical pain. And how many of our children don't feel connection? Okay, so developing connection, which we will talk about later, is really, really, really important. So an example of this is I was working in a primary school a couple of months ago with a year four boy. He had experienced some significant trauma and he was so desperate for connection, but he had no idea how to connect with his peers or his teacher. His behaviour was extreme. He was constantly shouting and swearing. He was gathering other children. He was rude. He refused to engage. He was constantly moving around the room. He could not connect with anyone, but he was so desperate for connection. So our challenge was to teach him how to connect. And we did that with social circles and social stories. And we had to be relentless with that. And we played lots of Lego and lots of games. And then gradually he managed to connect. But first and foremost, he had to connect with his teacher and himself. The next key ingredient is respect. And respect is so important. I respect you by showing you that I care about you, that I love you, that I want to teach you. But what I expect is the same in return. And I'm going to teach you and show you how to do that. And it's really, really important with behavior that we're role modeling and we're teaching all the time. We have to teach behavior. And I think sometimes we have very high expectations when children come to school that they have been taught those behaviors and they haven't. So, it is our job as educators and teachers to teach children what we expect from them, because that looks different for everyone. And finally, the last one of these key ingredients is around boundaries and being really clear about what those boundaries are. So I'm going to give you some really clear boundaries, but I will respect your boundaries. So one of the things I would always say to kids and people at work, actually, I'm not your friend. I'm here to teach you. But whatever happens, I'm always going to be here for you. And I think that's a really important message, especially when you're a secondary school teacher. And sometimes with older primary school kids, is I'm not your friend. I am your teacher. I'm not your mum. I'm not your aunt. I am your teacher. But whatever happens, I'm going to be here for you. But I am your teacher. So I just want you to have a think and just, if you've got a pen and paper, just write down what are three ways that you develop relationships with children you teach. If you've got any ideas, write them in the chat. How do you develop those relationships? Let's kind of share some ideas. So one of the things I did when I was in a secondary school as a year seven tutor, I always made sure I knew something about all of the kids in my tutor group. So on a Monday morning, I could connect with them as soon as they came in, whether it was about, how was the football match at the weekend, or, you went to see your grandparents, how was that? So just trying to find something that you can connect, what football team do you support? What's your favourite food? So right at the beginning in September, really trying to find out about these kids so you can really develop some of those relationships, and they will buy in because they see that you're interested in them. Okay. So these are my 6 steps to creating calm in your classroom. So I've used the acronym of BELONG, and there's been a lot of research recently about belonging at school and creating a sense of belonging for children and adults, the staff that work in school, so we all feel like we belong to something. So B is for behaviour. So this is the first step to create that calm in your classroom, and that is really about understanding behaviour, including kind of trauma-informed practices. That's where we bring in our curiosity. The environment, so E, is creating certainty in the classroom, and what does that classroom look like? Then L is around our language, our words, and our physical body language, and how they impact children's behaviour. Then we're going to look at O, observation. How do you spot dysregulation and how can you support that re-regulation? Then about nurture, which is about teaching behaviour through different techniques. And then finally, the 6th step is emotional intelligence and the part it plays in supporting children and adults. So in this masterclass, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into each of those 6 steps. I'm going to teach you 2 important elements from each of these steps that you can take away and try tomorrow. Okay, so those are my 6 steps. So let's get going on to the first step. So as we dive into these 6 steps to success, let's start by really understanding the foundation of behaviour. Now, recognizing that behavior is multifaceted, okay, is absolutely essential. There is no one size fits all. There is no off the shelf solution for behavior. It's multifaceted. So what we need to do is we've got to consider lots of different aspects of it and research. So let's consider the influences of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which emphasizes the need for safety and belonging before we can expect other behaviours to thrive. And as educators, we must ensure that children's needs are met at all levels of Maslow's hierarchy of need before we can start teaching. Understanding the concept that how we feel impacts how we behave. Okay, so our feelings impact how we behave. In our classrooms, we rarely know exactly how children are feeling because they keep those feelings under the surface. So their feelings will create, their emotions create behavior, and the behavior is communicating to us that there is a need, and understanding this need is essential. Okay, so behavior is communicating a need. So having a clear understanding of the difference between antisocial behavior and pro-social behavior and how we can swing that pendulum across is really, really important, because antisocial behavior is created from antisocial experiences, which I'm going to go through a little bit in the next slide. Polyvagal theory is really important to understand because it gives us insights into how our body's nervous system reacts to stress. Okay, so now this is crucial for both adults and children. It informs how we can build those great relationships based on trust and safety. And polyvagal theory looks at the fight, flight, and fawn response, and that's really important when we're trying to create that safety in the classroom. So we've talked about building great relationships. The next thing is about understanding the 3 Rs. Now, Dr. Bruce Perry has a model called the 3 Rs. It's a really useful tool, and we need to really develop that and understand how that can help regulate children. We also need to consider the window of tolerance and how trauma impacts the body and the brain. So there's a lot of research out there around behavior and how we can help to manage that, and having an understanding of all those different concepts is really important. So what I want to talk you through is is Maslow and how that works. So as educators, we have to ensure that children's needs are met. If we look at all the different elements of Maslow's hierarchy, and I will send out a PDF at the end of this masterclass, and in that PDF you can evaluate where you think children are in your class and whether their needs are being met. So my question would be, what do you think happens if a child's needs here aren't met? So you can write that in the chat. What do you think if a child's physiological needs aren't met? How are they going to respond? So we might have children coming to school who haven't eaten. Now we're in a cost of living crisis, and this is very real for a lot of children. They're not getting their breakfast and they're not eating properly. If they don't feel safe at home, if they don't have a sense of love and belonging at home, all of these things, if they're not being met, can present in their behaviours when they come to school. So it's really important to understand the impact that that can have on their ability to learn. And people say, well, that's not, is that really our job? We can't teach unless Maslow's hierarchy of needs is being met, unless children feel safe and loved and have had food and have a sense of belonging and have high self-esteem, because once they have all those, then they can thrive. The second thing I want to go through is the tree around antisocial and pro-social behaviours. So what you'll see on the left-hand side of the tree is at the bottom, you will see antisocial experiences. So this is where children have had something called adverse childhood experiences. So that could be exclusion from school, abuse, neglect, abandonment. something around where they've been shamed in public, that's their experiences in life, then they will have negative feelings about themselves. So they'll feel rejected or isolated, they feel unimportant, they feel irrelevant or humiliated. Those negative feelings create that antisocial behaviour that we see in schools. So the key to changing that behaviour is to swing the pendulum across to pro-social. So if we can give children pro-social experiences like getting them interested in something, getting them involved in team sport, giving them leadership roles, making sure they've got strong friendship groups. With those pro-social experiences, they start to feel better about themselves. They feel motivated, they feel connected, they feel like they belong, they feel liked. And then when you start to feel these things, then we start to see that pro-social and positive behavior. Okay, so when people say, how do you change that behavior? It's about creating those pro-social experiences so they can feel better and then they behave in a different way. So having a clear understanding between the two means you can help that pendulum swing across. Now, the important bit here is if you've got really strong relationships with the parents, getting them to take the kids to team sports and getting them involved in those pro-social experiences can be really, really helpful. So it's a collaborative approach to really unpicking and understanding how we can create those positive experiences for children so they feel better about themselves, so they can behave in a positive way. So that was B. So the next one I want to introduce is environment. Okay, so the environment. So this is the second step. So if our classroom corridors and play spaces are calm, clean, and organised, then it shows that we care. Okay, this shows the children we care, and it's essential to creating that calm classroom. In every classroom, we should aim to create regulated spaces or calm spaces. And these are places where students can retreat when feeling overwhelmed. It's about fostering an atmosphere that promotes emotional safety and well-being. So if you've got any ideas, if you want to tell me in the chat, is there anything you've got in your classrooms to support regulation? What does that look like at the moment? Ideas might be a corner with books, you might have a beanbag, tent, a dim light, sensory toys, fidgets. We have to be really careful with fidgets. Lego, how do you create that regulation space in your classroom? But an aside to this is make sure you have clear rules around when and who can use those regulation activities and time limit them if you need to. The second thing that I want to talk about is values-led classroom. What is a values-led classroom? Now, this means aligning our classroom setup with the values that we want to instill in the children that we teach, whether that's respect, kindness, or curiosity. Our environment should reflect these values. So one thing that is important here that I want to teach you is to establish what your class values are with your class. So ask them the things they value, then get them to rank them. Okay, so what do you value in this classroom? What do you want? And you'll be really surprised what they want when they say, we want it to be calm, we would like it to be quiet, we want everyone to be respectful, we want everyone to be kind. Get them to list out all the different things they value in the classroom. Then once you have that, rank them. So if if 25 people want kindness and 20 people want calm, you come up with your top 3 or 5 values in your classroom. All right. Then what you do is you can then teach them what those values look like in the classroom. And then throughout the year, you just refer to them, or daily you can reinforce it. Say, right, in our classroom, what do we value? And the kids put up their hands and say, we value calm, we value kindness, we value respect. Great. What does that look like? And make sure you teach them what respect looks like. What does respect look like? Us being quiet when others are talking. So you teach to those values in your classroom. Now, I know your school will have their own school values, but this is really about creating the calm in your classroom. What do you value? What do your children value? And it's a really good way to start in September by laying out those values, teaching them, and then reminding that these are the values that we all want. And this is what we want to do in our classroom. And it's really important to remember that the environment plays such a vital role in shaping your experience and the children's experience. I'd like you to have a look at this classroom. I've literally seen hundreds of classrooms like this in my job. It's a pretty standard primary classroom. And if you just want to pop in the chat, kind of what you see in this picture, what do you see? And I'll tell you what I see. So what I see is lots of things hanging down everywhere. I see a messy classroom teacher desk. It's dark. There's too much information on the walls. The children probably won't know where to look. So my question is, do you think that's a calm learning environment? Um, and there is a thing, certainly in primary schools, about having lots of the kids work up and lots of things like that. But I can tell you, when I walk into a classroom like that, I get overstimulated. I start to dysregulate. I don't know whether I'm looking at learning ladders or reading charts or thunderclouds or reward charts or school rules or values. Then I've got things hanging off the walls. It can be very dysregulating for a child. Now, I'm not saying that we should all strip it back and it should be boring and dull. Absolutely not. Okay. Um, but we need to give careful thought to how we are overstimulating children and what that looks like. It is important to celebrate and have children's work up, but just think about what it is that you're creating. Okay, now I'd like you just to take a deep breath. And as you look out, I'm just going to change this and now tell me what you think you see. How do you feel seeing this? So note the calming colours. It's very natural, it's very neutral. There's lots of sunlight. The walls are quite plain. There's a really nice regulation space. The strip lighting is probably a little bit too much for me, but straight away this says calm, calm to me. Um, Now, I know you'll probably look at that, and there'll be some senior leaders on this call looking at this going, wow, that's lovely, but that's going to cost a lot of money. Um, and yes, it probably would. But it is amazing what you can do with just a little bit of thought and a fresh perspective. So one of the things I do when I go into schools is get people to buddy up and say, can you just come and have a look at my classroom and tell me what you think? Is this overwhelming? And actually just a fresh pair of eyes can say, ah, whoa, this is really overwhelming. I don't know where to look. Gives a bit of a fresh perspective. So certainly for people who are starting out in teaching and you're setting up your classroom over the summer holidays, um, just think carefully about, colours and tone and what you want the children to focus on, because too much, they won't see it. So it's really important to just think about what that environment looks like. Okay, so next we are going to delve into the topic of language. So let's remember that our words hold immense power in shaping children's experiences. And I'm sure all of us on here will be able to hark back to a day when we were at school, when somebody said something to us, and we've held on to it for a very long time. Um, we do say things, and they land and they last. So what we say is really, really important. Now you'll hear a lot about scripts and scripted language, and there are some people who are really for using scripts and some people really against. I think personally that scripted language can be really, really helpful to us. But, and there is a but, we mustn't overuse it and we mustn't overdo it. I've been in schools that have got like 17 scripts and staff can't learn them. I've been in schools who've got lanyards and they've got scripts printed on the badges or hanging off their necks that are short and small, and that's fine. I use literally two scripts. My first one is, how can I help? How can I help? I'm here. How can I help? And I use that with kids all the time. How can I help? I say that to staff all the time. I'd walk in and go, how can I help? Really simple. And the second one I use is, I can see you are upset. I'm here to listen. I'm here to keep you safe. Now that one creates certainty and safety. All right? It creates certainty and safety. Children know exactly how you are going to respond, to the point that I have even heard children saying to each other, "How can I help?" Or, "I can see you are upset. I'm here to listen. I'm here to keep you safe." Um, and it's that certainty that creates that psychological safety, okay? And it creates the safety and it creates calm, and kids love that certainty. So think about scripts and scripted language. The second thing is shaming, all right? Shaming can impact and shaming can create barriers to learning. So it's crucial to foster an environment where children feel safe to express themselves. The language we use can have extremely harmful impact. As I said, we've all remember something that teacher said to us that had an impact, either negative or positive, actually, saying something that stays with you for a long time. Um, I mean, I remember my head of sixth form telling me once that I'd never amount to anything. So, what did he know? But I remember it, and I'm still angry about it. I can remember what I did to elicit such a statement, but I certainly remember those words. And so I'm sure you will do at some point. And it's really important to hold each other to account for shaming. So, and that can be quite difficult. I was working in a school and the TA, I delivered this training module around shaming. And we were walking down the corridor. I heard a teaching assistant say something to a child, and she just turned around. She said to me, "Oh, that was shaming." I said, "Yes, that language probably did feel shaming for that child. But the important thing is you've identified it. So what are you going to do about it?" Um, so she turned to me and said, "Yes, I recognise it," and she changed her language because she was aware of it. And a lot of this is about our self-awareness. I still say things sometimes. In shock, I take a deep breath. Right, I've just shamed that child, and I do, and I will say to the child, like, I'm sorry that probably didn't land very well, or I'm sorry how that made you feel. So remember, the language we use shapes not just understanding, but their emotional well-being too. So let's embrace this responsibility, okay, of shaming. So here are some examples that I've seen or heard that can create a feeling of shame for children. So calling out children in front of the class is a practice that you know has gone on for decades and can make the child feel extremely uncomfortable. Yesterday, I spoke to a child, and she was telling me that she struggles at school because she doesn't feel like the teacher likes her because he's always telling her off in front of everybody else. So she there misbehaves in his lesson because she doesn't feel that she's liked or wanted. Um, Making children stand outside classrooms, offices, or corridors. Again, this is a practice that happens across the land. There is no problem saying to a child, "Step outside the classroom," and then going out and having a chat with them. But leaving children outside classrooms, offices, or corridors is telling everybody else the reason why they're out there, and that creates that shame. And then we go back to that negative experience, that antisocial experience that's creating that antisocial feeling that's going to create that antisocial behavior. Okay. Placing names on the sad face board or using thunderclouds. Again, we're shaming children in front of everybody, isolating a child to work in a corner on their own, or maybe laughing at an answer from a child. So these are just a few ideas of shaming behavior. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the next key step to success, which is observation. Now, this is crucial for understanding signs of dysregulation in children and in our colleagues, actually. It's essential to recognise that everyone experiences stress responses differently. So the first thing we need to do is identify signs. What does dysregulation look like? Now, that could be changes in behaviour, body language, or even patterns of communication. Now, physical signs, especially for younger children, well, actually, no, all ages, because you will see this in teenagers as well. So, physical signs, children start to get hot, clammy hands, they go red in the face, they complain of stomach aches, crying, shivering. These can all be really early signs of dysregulation. So, have a think about some of the children that you teach. Can you see these signs? Can you think back and think, "Oh, yes, that I know that actually." And when her cheeks start going red, Um, or actually, no, he's always taking his jumper off because he's getting hot just before he starts to misbehave. Once you can start to identify the signs of early dysregulation, then you'll be able to start to see the triggers. Okay, and that's really important to think about what's triggering those behaviours. But first, let's look at signs. What signs can you see for dysregulation? So when you're back in the classroom tomorrow, think about, really looking at the physical signs in your classroom. And if you've got a teaching assistant or another adult in the class at some point, ask them to just say, oh, just keep an eye on, can you see anything different about those physical responses? The next thing is about co-regulation. Now, this is where we as educators play a really vital role in supporting our students. Co-regulation is about us modelling calmness and providing a safe space that we can help them to reconnect with their own self-regulation skills. Now, there are several ways to co-regulate. So when I'm working in a primary school, I would always lower my body down to their level, which is always a tricky one because I can never get up again. But anyway, I usually get them to help me, which is always a bit of a laugh. Um, I always lower my voice. I'm always very calm, I'm very slow, I'm very deliberate. And then I'll use one of my scripts because that's very clear and they're expecting that. I then connect with them about something that interests them, or I try to refocus their attention away from what is causing them to dysregulate. Okay, so that's one way to co-regulate. And I want you to remember that regulation is a two-way street. Both children and adults can experience these challenges. So it's important to practice self-awareness and to be attuned to our own emotional states so that we can effectively support the children that we teach. We have to make sure that we're all on the same page about the impact of observations in our classroom. Observations, watching and learning about children is absolutely essential. So, yes, so here's some specific signs of dysregulation. So, sweating or blushing, cold, sweaty palms, feeling sick, dizzy, yawning, actually. Don't ever think it's because your teaching is boring. Yawning can actually be a sign of dysregulation, all right? And some of the ways that you can break some of that dysregulation is gentle activity, such as, going out for a walk, getting outside in nature, maybe doing some regulation exercises. Probably more tricky in secondary schools, but certainly in primary schools, you would have this as part of their behaviour or regulation plan to ensure that there are activities to help reconnect and stop that dysregulation. Basically, the earlier you spot it, the better. And here's some other ones: confused, foggy thinking. Sometimes when children can't get their words out, or tunnel vision, or tinnitus. So there are a couple of things there as well, and some activities you can do around stimulating their mind, getting them to talk about something they enjoy, distracting them from the negative thoughts. So these are all signs of physical signs of dysregulation that if you see, you can intervene early enough, then you can stop that further dysregulation. So that's observation. Uh, right, so let's look at the concept of nurture. So I want to emphasize that it's vital in our journey to success in the classroom here. It's essential to understand that consequences should be viewed not as a form of punishment, but as a valuable tool to teach expected behaviours. All right, so if we look at consequences versus punishments, consequence is about teaching. All right, it's about teaching behaviour, whereas punishment isn't. Um, so this is a perspective shift that can really transform how we approach classroom management. Consequences can teach behaviour, punishments hurt. All right, say that again: consequences teach, punishments hurt. So consequences say, right, you can put this right. This is the behavior, this is the consequence, but you can put it right. But a punishment that tells a child they're bad. When consequences are used well, they can guide children to make better choices. So if we look at, so this is a, we have a lot, I have a lot of conversations with people about punishments and consequences. So punishment is about stopping a behavior. It often leads to resentment. You might get a temporary change, but it's unlikely to last. So, an example of a punishment might be I'm going to get a detention for late assignments, then sit in a room staring at a wall, and nobody's going to talk to me. So that there is nothing in there that teaches the child about changing their behavior. It's a punishment. Whereas a consequence teaches responsibility, it promotes self-reflection, it creates lasting behavioral change. So, for an example, would be right, you've missed that assignment, you're going to complete the missed work at lunch. That's a consequence. Consequence for not doing it is you're missing a bit of your lunch, but you're going to do the work. So there is a difference between the two. Now, the emotional impact of punishment often leads to resentment and shame, and using consequences promotes self-reflection, learning, and ownership. All right. The long-term impact of punishments really is that it just changes things temporarily, but research shows it doesn't stop any repeat behaviors because the behavior isn't being tackled. We're not actually tackling the behavior, we're just punishing somebody. So using consequences leads to longer behavioral change. All right. So it's really important to think about that. The second thing I want to teach you in this step is about restorative conversations. Restorative conversations are so powerful, and these are really crucial for helping students to repair and restore relationships. So, if there's been a behaviour incident, after an incident, you can sit the child down or the children, and you ask them four questions. What happened? How were you feeling at the time? What do you need now? What would you do differently? All right. And using this conversation, we can teach behavior through responsibility, basically. And these conversations don't have to take much time. Class teachers often say to me, I haven't got time for a restorative conversation. Well, some of the best restorative conversations, certainly the ones that I've done and I've seen other people do, are literally walking side by side in the corridor or sitting down and having lunch with a child and having a restorative conversation with them in the playground or walking to the canteen. For younger children, what we have done is we've done restorative circles, and this allows them to learn about each other. But you have to be really, really make sure you've got some good rules in place as to who talks when, and that we're listening with empathy and kindness. We take it in turns, everybody gets their voice heard. And that is really powerful because they learn to understand the impact of their behaviors on others. So it's really, really important. So
Awesome.
that's restorative conversations. So overall, we're going to move now into
Remember,
ah,
when it's a name, it can be spelled any way it wants.
hello, somebody's got their microphone off. Um, right, so overall nurturing is about building connections and understanding. So it sets the foundation for growth, which we're going to talk about next. Okay, so as we move on to discussion, we're going to talk about growth. So I want you just to take a moment to reflect on some of the key concepts that are vital for our development as educators and caregivers. What we need to consider is our own emotional intelligence. It's important to recognise how we, as adults, can influence the atmosphere in our classrooms. So I said earlier about thinking about that metaphor of bringing the weather into the classroom. Our emotional states can significantly affect our children's experiences in the classroom. If we arrive dysregulated, stressed, reactive, then children will feel that. Okay. Uh, they will feel it's contagious. And kids are so astute and they just pick it up straight away. Doesn't matter how much you think you're not stressed, they will pick it up. So being aware of our own triggers is key to creating that safety in the classroom. So think about the things that trigger you. What triggers you? Think about this carefully, maybe talk to a colleague or a loved one. Really think about what is it that triggers me and how do I feel if I'm late for work, I've got stuck in traffic, or my kids wouldn't get up on time and go to school, or I've had a row with my husband, or I've got some bad news. How do we take that into the classroom? So really thinking about our own emotional state and where we are when we go in. The second thing I want you to think about is clear boundaries. Now, it's essential to establish clear boundaries, not just for ourselves, but also for the children we work with. It really helps to create that safe environment where everyone knows what to expect. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So protect your energy, set clear emotional and time boundaries, and that's not selfish, that's about being professional. So raising our own self-awareness is vital to creating that calm in the classroom. And this is where our own personal growth is key in understanding our own responses and actions. Think about how aware you are, what techniques do you use to regulate yourself, and are others aware around you, and how do they regulate themselves? So have a think about your your boundaries. Or do you make sure you leave work on time at a certain time? Do you have social boundaries? Do you have physical boundaries? Have you got relationship boundaries at work? But think about your own boundaries. That's really important and key to creating that safety in the classroom for yourselves and for your kids. Okay, so in the chat, just let me know what are you going to take away and think about regarding your own personal boundaries. Is it about having time for yourself? Is it about committing to do things that brings you joy? Is it thinking about your classroom, your environment, how you allow others into your space? Have a think and let us know in the chat, what you think you need to do around your own personal boundaries. Okay, so basically that was a quick whiz through the 6 steps to success. You've had a taste of the Belong model today. Um, if you want to know, if you want more information and you've liked what you've heard and you've liked the style, and you want more of this, then there is the Behaviour Bites program that I've been writing with Kath over the last, well, 2 or 3 years. It's a really structured, practical training program for you personally or for your whole staff team if you're a leader in a school. It's 11 short, digestible videos. And what it does is it gives you all the every content of the belonging 6 steps. There's a lot more in there for each one. As you can see, there are 2 parts of behaviours communication of need. It's trauma in the classroom, creating that sensitive classroom, consequences, punishments, co-regulation, ideas for self-regulation, creating the classroom culture, more on restorative conversations, shaming, and leadership of self. They're 15-minute videos, so they're easy to watch at any point, any time. The course has been fully CPD accredited. It's full of strategies, it's got tools, it's got PDFs. There's lots of reflection questions in here that you can use for yourself and for your whole team. And each module is a bite-sized piece of information. Okay, and it's all hosted on a learning platform. If you want to get the rest of the information to fully achieve the 6 steps to success, this will be really helpful for you. We've got some great testimonials so far on the course and some really good feedback. So if you want to see what that looks like, then we have that. And then, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to give you an offer. So here's my offer. If you are interested, and if you buy it in the next 3 days to this group only, you can get the entire 11 module program for £47 plus VAT for all 11 modules. It's a special price just for you guys. Also included in that is 12 months access to the online learning platform. There'll be some PDF resources. And on top of that, I'm going to offer 3 1-hour group coaching sessions to this group. So for you guys, if you do want to buy in, we will do some group coaching sessions to see how the Behaviour Bites program is going for you and how it's embedding in your classroom and any questions that you might have that we can go through. And on top of that, we also have a Behaviour Bites Facebook community, which is private, so you can have access to that where we can ask questions and have chats. So that is me, and that's our QR code. Obviously, we'll have access to the recording of this webinar, and you can visit our website if you want to buy some licenses. If it's for a school, you can get group discounts. So there's our contact details. And that is me. So I'm going to stop now and see if we've got any questions from anybody. So I found out nobody heard anything.
Whilst we're waiting to see if any questions come in, there was a couple of really good things here around Emily was saying the way she's going to protect her boundaries about not being as willing to say yes to everything and
Brilliant.
focusing on protecting her time, which was brilliant. And Wendy talking about being more communicative, saying what she needs, which is really good.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, lots of thank yous in there. Um, okay, there's a question in here from Emily. I don't know if you can see the chat, Mandy, asking how would you go about conducting a restorative conversation with an older child whose behaviour isn't changing over time?
Emily, I would try and get them at lunchtime or at break, or grab them in the afternoon. I'd try and get them at a time to have that proper restorative conversation. You can either make it formal or informal. The informal ones with older kids tend to work. But if it doesn't, try and grab another member of staff to do that restorative conversation between you and the student. That might be helpful as well. So, Victoria had a hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just
Um,
put it in the chat. Do you want me to speak or?
Yeah, go for it.
It was just, I think it sounds absolutely fantastic. I've sort of fully recognized all of those ideas, look amazing. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on sort of the neurodivergent children, autistic with ADHD, and whether there's any adaptations for those kids that you have come to, or whether this would is for them as well, or whether that's a separate module, for example.
I think great question, but I think the majority of those strategies can be used for neurodivergent children. I think the complexities might be different for some children, and you might need to make different adaptations, certainly around the sensory culture in the classroom, but certainly around the communication and the trust. Those strategies can be used the same, but you probably need to be a little more aware of the interpretation and the communication and how that works. Anyone else?
there's no more in the chat at the moment, but if you want to come off mute, you can come off mute.
Okay, well, that's it. Look at that. 16:59.
Well done.
Brilliant. Well, folks, if you want to email in or you've got any questions or you want to learn more about the course, then just give us a shout. But thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining us. And I did hit record at the beginning, which is amazing. So I will make sure that you will have access to the recording. And thank you very much for attending. It's been lovely to talk to you all and see some old faces. Bye bye. Thanks, folks.
Do you want to hit stop recording?